In the shadowed vaults of eternity, where echoes of forgotten voices linger like frost on ancient stone, a single unspoken word can shatter the chains of silence. The grand hall of Eldridge Manor stretched like a forgotten dream, its vaulted ceilings lost in cobwebs that danced in the faint glow of a single chandelier. Candles flickered along the walls, casting elongated shadows that twisted like tormented souls. Elias Blackthorne, the Alpha King's son, sat upon a throne of weathered oak, his eyes, deep pools of obsidian, fixed on the frost-laced windows beyond. At 28 in human years, though his lineage marked him as timeless, Elias had not uttered a word in 7 years. Not since the night his mother's blood stained the marble floors of their ancestral castle, her final plea dissolving into the ether as the rival pack's assassins claimed her life. He was born of the Alpha King, Victor Blackthorne, a vampire lord whose rule spanned centuries, blending the feral strength of werewolves with the eternal hunger of the undead, a hybrid king in a world that revered such monstrosities. Elias, his heir, inherited the curse, immortality laced with the beast's rage, yet he bore the additional scar of selective mutism, a fortress built from grief. His trauma was a living thing, abandonment by his father's endless wars, the illness that had ravaged his mother's body before the blades did, and a disillusionment with a throne that demanded voices he could no longer lend. He desired only solitude, a quiet unraveling in the ruins of what was. Outside, the wind howled through the Scottish Highlands, carrying the scent of pine and impending snow. The manor, a relic of Victorian grandeur, now crumbling at the edges, stood isolated on cliffs overlooking the North Sea. Elias's days blurred into nights. He communicated through gestures, his broad frame, clad in black velvet and leather, moving like a shadow among the sparse servants who dared remain loyal. His father, Victor, had long since retreated to his own shadowed councils, leaving Elias to stew in silence, a prince marked by guilt for surviving when she did not. The Alpha King's blood ran thick in him, granting strength that could fell armies, but it also whispered of isolation, a loneliness etched into his very veins. Into this mausoleum of quiet stepped Clara Hawthorne, a human teacher of 32, her arrival as unbidden as a thaw in winter. Orphaned young in the fog-shrouded streets of London, Clara had clawed her way through illness, a lingering fever in her youth that left her lungs fragile and her spirit scarred by abandonment. Her parents' death in a cholera outbreak had left her disillusioned with fate's cruelty, yet she sought redemption in teaching, molding broken minds into something resilient. Desires burned quietly within her, to heal the unseen wounds, to find a voice for the voiceless, even as her own health faltered with each labored breath. Hired by Victor's distant decree to tutor the silent heir, perhaps to coax him back to the pack's fold, Clara entered the hall with a valise of worn books, her auburn hair pinned loosely, gray eyes sharp against the pallor of her skin. She paused at the threshold, the air heavy with the scent of beeswax and decay. Elias did not look up, but his nostrils flared, catching the faint trace of lavender on her, human, fragile, alive in a way that stirred the beast within him. "Your Highness," she said softly, her voice a gentle cadence against the silence. "I am Clara Hawthorne. I've come to teach." No response. She set her books down, the leather covers whispering against the stone floor. The room seemed to hold its breath. Distant waves crashed like muffled heartbeats. As days bled into weeks, Clara's lessons unfolded in the manor's library, a cavern of dusty tomes and flickering candlelight. She spoke of philosophy, of mortal coils and eternal echoes, her words weaving through the air like smoke. Elias watched, his silence a wall, but his eyes betrayed flickers, curiosity, resistance. He resisted the pull, rationalizing her presence as an intrusion, yet inevitability crept in. One evening, as snow began to dust the windows, Clara traced a finger along a cracked mirror in the corner, its silver surface warped like memory itself. "Mirrors lie," she murmured, "but they show what we refuse to see." The mirror became their silent witness, a symbol recurring in stolen glances, reflecting not just faces, but the chasms between them. Introspection gripped Elias that night, alone in his chambers. The weight of his father's legacy pressed like a shroud, the pack's expectations, the immortality that isolated him from fleeting human joys. Death hovered, invisible, in the chill drafts, a companion to his mutism. Clara's voice lingered in his mind, a whisper against the void. He touched the mirror's edge, seeing not his reflection, but hers, superimposed, alive and breaking. Yet as she departed that session, a shadow stirred in the manor's depths, a rival pack's scout, eyes gleaming with malice, watching from the tree line. Elias sensed it, his body tensing, but his voice remained locked. Clara, oblivious, stepped into the snow, her breath clouding the air. What word could unlock him before the shadows claimed her fragile light? Clara returned the next dawn, the sky a bruised purple over the cliffs, her coat dusted with frost. The manor's doors creaked open like reluctant confessions, admitting her into the labyrinth of silence. Elias awaited in the library, sunlight filtering through leaded panes in shafts that illuminated motes of dust, turning them to fleeting stars. He sat rigidly, a volume of Shelley open before him, unread, untouched. Clara, ever the patient architect of words, began with poetry, her voice a balm against the cold stone. "Words are the wings of the soul," she read, her tone introspective, drawing him into the rhythm of iambs. Elias's biography unfolded in his mind like a forbidden tome. Born in the blood moon of 1997, amidst the Alpha King's wars against encroaching werewolf clans, he had witnessed his mother's transformation into a Dhampir, a half-vampire bound to Victor in eternal romance, her humanity fading into shadowed devotion. Her death at 25 human years shattered him. The assassin's silver blades, poisoned with wolfsbane, ended her before she could fully embrace the eternity she chose for love. Elias, then 21, retreated into silence, his trauma a vow against the world's cruelties. He desired connection, yet guilt chained him, guilt for not saving her, for the immortal blood that made him watch her age and break while he endured. Clara, too, carried her ghosts. Raised in London's underbelly after her parents' fever claimed them, she battled her own respiratory frailty, a constant whisper of mortality. Abandoned by suitors who feared her delicacy, she poured her disillusionment into teaching, seeking to redeem the forsaken. Her desire was simple, yet profound, to witness transformation, to turn suffering into speech. Their sessions deepened, alternating slow revelations with bursts of tension. One afternoon, as rain pattered against the glass like insistent fingers, Clara posed a question. "What silences you, Elias? Is it fear or something deeper?" He met her gaze, the mirror nearby catching the golden flicker of candlelight on his sharp features. No answer came, but his hand twitched toward a quill, then stilled. The air thickened with unspoken philosophy. Plato's cave, shadows as truth. Death's presence lingered in the library's chill, a draft that mimicked labored breaths, reminding them both of fragility. Intimacy bloomed in textures. The velvet of Elias's sleeve brushing a book, the metallic tang of ink on her fingertips, the soft glow of a candelabro illuminating her profile. He resisted, rationalizing her as a mortal fleeting thing, yet her persistence eroded his walls. A revelation struck during a storm. Lightning illuminated the mirror, fracturing their reflections into shards. Clara shared a fragment of her past. "I lost my voice once, to fever. It returned, but scarred." Elias's eyes softened, a crack in the armor. That night, solitude gripped him. Pacing the ruins of the manor's east wing, crumbling arches overgrown with ivy, he felt the beast stir, the vampire hunger mingling with wolfish isolation. Victor's distant command echoed in his blood. "Speak, or lose the throne." But Clara's whisper haunted him. Outside, the scout's shadow lengthened, claws scraping stone. Elias clutched the mirror's frame, seeing her face again, vulnerable. A moral dilemma clawed: intervene silently or break for her. As Clara retired to her guest quarters, a low growl echoed from the woods, the rival pack closing in. Her door rattled faintly, and in the mirror's reflection, Elias saw his own lips part, wordless as peril approached. The storm raged through the night, wind tearing at the manor's turrets like vengeful spirits. Clara awoke to the howl, her chest tightening with the old illness, breath shallow in the candlelit room. Down the hall, Elias stood sentinel at his window, the mirror propped against the sill, reflecting moonlight on his tense form. The scout's intrusion was no mere shadow. It was the vanguard of the Silverfang pack, rivals to Victor's hybrid reign, seeking to exploit the heir's silence as weakness. Morning brought a fragile truce, the library a sanctuary of warmed leather and smoldering hearth. Clara arrived with tea, chamomile, steaming, its herbal scent cutting the musty air. "Today we speak of choices," she said, her voice steady despite the cough that betrayed her frailty. Elias nodded faintly, the first gesture of engagement. She delved into existential tomes, Kierkegaard's Leaps of Faith, her words painting dilemmas of light and shadow. He listened, the mirror nearby capturing the play of firelight on their faces, a symbol of fractured selves yearning for wholeness. Elias's inner world churned. His father's Dhampir queen, his mother Ilara, had chosen eternity for Victor, her human life traded for immortal love. Her trauma, the slow erosion of mortality, mirrored his own guilt. He desired absolution, to speak her name without shattering. Clara, in turn, revealed more. "Abandonment taught me that silence is a cage we build ourselves." Her eyes, gray as storm clouds, held his, forging an inevitable thread. Action pierced the introspection when a branch snapped outside. Too deliberate. Elias rose, his body coiling like a predator, guiding Clara to the window. Through the mist, eyes gleamed, the scout, testing boundaries. Tension mounted, hearts pounding in cadence with the distant thunder. In a ritual of choice, Elias pressed a hand to the glass, inches from hers, wordless but present. The moment stretched, sensory, rain's chill seeping through cracks, the velvet texture of fear. Philosophy wove in. "Is silence death or rebirth?" Clara whispered. He turned, lips parting, but the word died. The scout retreated, but the threat lingered. That evening, alone, Elias confronted the mirror, tracing a scar on his palm from the night Ilara fell. Death's invisible hand brushed his shoulder, urging surrender. Clara, in her room, penned a letter to an old friend, the candle's flame dancing. A shadow passed her door, footsteps, soft as deceit. She froze, heart racing, as the lock clicked ominously. What choice would Elias make when silence could no longer protect her? And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. Dawn crept in like a hesitant lover, painting the manor's corridors in pale gold. Clara, shaken from the night's intrusion, met Elias in the library with resolve etched in her posture. The mirror, now a fixture between them, leaned against the mantel, its surface fogged from the hearth's warmth. "We face shadows together," she said, her voice a thread of compassion amid the Gothic gloom. Elias's solitude had always been his ethic, a self-imposed exile from the pack's blood-soaked rituals. Marked by guilt over Ilara's choice for Victor, he rationalized human connections as illusions, yet Clara's persistence unraveled him. Her own biography deepened in quiet confessions, Orphaned at 12, her illness a constant specter, she had abandoned dreams of family for the redemptive power of words. Desires intertwined. Theirs a dance of resisted inevitability. The day unfolded in cadenced rhythm. Slow readings of Nietzsche, the eternal recurrence, interspersed with sensory details, the crackle of logs, the velvet hush of pages turning, the faint coppery scent of Elias's restrained hunger. Action surged when Victor arrived unannounced, his presence a storm of dark charisma. The Alpha King, centuries old, with eyes like forged steel, demanded progress. "Speak, boy, or the pack fractures." Elias stiffened. Silence his rebellion. Clara interjected, her words a shield. Silence is not weakness, it's a forge. In the revelation's grip, Victor revealed a fragment. Ilara's Dhampir bond had been her salvation and curse, her love redeeming his damned soul. Elias touched the mirror, seeing his mother's ghost superimposed on Clara's reflection. A symbolic bridge. Philosophy pierced. Immortality as memory's prison, love as the key. Night fell with snow blanketing the cliffs, sounds muffled, distant waves, slow breaths. Elias walked Clara to her door, his hand lingering near hers. The rival's threat echoed in howls from the woods. Alone, he wrestled the dilemma. Break silence for her, or let death claim another. A window shattered downstairs, glass shards glittering like stars. Clara's scream pierced the night. The scout had breached, claws extended. Elias bolted, heart thundering, the mirror's image haunting him. The intruder's breach shattered the manor's fragile peace, shards of glass crunching underfoot like brittle bones. Elias descended the stairs in a blur, his hybrid form half emerging, eyes glowing amber, fangs bared in silent fury. Clara huddled in the foyer, her breath ragged, the metallic tang of fear sharp in the air. The scout, a wiry werewolf with silver fur matted by rain, lunged, but Elias intercepted, his strength a whirlwind of restrained power. No words escaped him. Instead, claws raked flesh, driving the beast back into the storm. Blood scented the rugs, warm, viscous, mingling with the ozone of lightning. Clara, trembling, bandaged a shallow cut on her arm by candlelight, the mirror in her room reflecting her pallid face. "You saved me," she whispered as Elias entered, his form reverting, guilt etching deeper lines. Their bond resisted still. He rationalized it as duty. She as fleeting gratitude, but inevitability pulsed like a shared heartbeat. Days of recovery blended introspection and tension. In the library, under the golden haze of afternoon light, Clara explored his trauma. "Your mother's choice, eternity for love. Does it haunt you?" Elias nodded, tracing the mirror's frame, the symbol now scarred from the night's chaos. His desires surfaced in gestures, a book offered, a fire stoked, echoing his loneliness, the ethical core that forbade harming the innocent. Philosophy deepened. Sartre's bad faith, choices defining essence. Sensory layers enveloped them, the texture of wool blankets against skin, the low rumble of thunder, the glow of embers on velvet drapes. Victor summoned Elias to the throne room, revealing pack intrigues, the Silverfangs plotted to dethrone the silent heir. "Choose life for the pack," the king urged, his voice a gravelly echo. Elias's inner ritual unfolded alone in the ruins, snow falling like forgotten tears. Death loomed in the cold, a moral precipice. Protect Clara, embrace voice, or succumb to isolation. That evening, as they shared a meal, wine dark as blood, bread soft as confession, a messenger arrived, bearing a Silverfang ultimatum: surrender the manor or face war. Clara's hand brushed his. Warmth sparked, but outside, more shadows gathered, howls rising. Elias's lips moved, the word forming in silence. What if it was for her? The ultimatum hung like a noose, the manor's halls echoing with the pack's distant calls. Elias and Clara retreated to the library, the mirror a silent arbiter between them, its surface now etched with frost from the encroaching winter. Candle flames danced, casting red-gold hues on tapestries frayed by time, scenes of ancient hunts, lovers entwined in eternal embrace. Clara's illness flared, a cough racking her frame, yet she pressed on, her voice a lifeline. Love is the ultimate choice between shadow and light. Elias, his ethical solitude cracking, shared fragments through writing, notes on Alara's Dhampir transformation, her romance with Victor a beacon in his guilt-ridden nights. At 32, Clara confessed her deepest disillusionment, the abandonment by a fiancé who feared her frailty, mirroring his own, desires aligned. Redemption through connection, transformation from pain. The rhythm shifted to revelation, a private ritual by the hearth. Elias lit additional candles, their wax dripping like tears, the air thick with beeswax and lavender. He placed a hand on the mirror, inviting her to do the same. In that touch, separated by glass, philosophy bloomed. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die. Her eyes widened. He had written it earlier, but now it hung unspoken, profound. Action intruded as Victor's forces clashed with scouts in the courtyard, swords clanging, growls piercing the night, snow churned to crimson mud. Elias shielded Clara, his body a barrier, the beast within howling for release. In the chaos, a silver-fang blade nicked his arm, blood welling, vampiric, slow to heal. Clara staunched it, her touch intimate, sensual in its tenderness, the texture of her skin against his a forbidden spark. Post-battle hush brought introspection. Alone, Elias confronted the mirror, seeing not silence but potential, a word forming, her name. Death's presence waned, replaced by the curse of love's inevitability. Victor, bloodied but victorious, warned, "The pack needs your voice, or all falls." As peace settled, Clara whispered philosophy by his side. Camus's absurd, finding meaning in suffering. A dilemma crystallized. Utter the word, claim eternity with her, or let shadows consume. Moonlight flooded the room, illuminating the mirror's depths. Elias leaned close, lips parting. But a new howl echoed, closer, deadlier. The ritual incomplete, peril renewed. If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts. The howls of the Silverfang reinforcements sliced through the blizzard like shards of ice, their ferocity amplified by the wind that whipped snow into blinding veils across the manor's battlements. Elias gripped Clara's hand, his fingers, cold and unyielding as forged iron, pulling her through the labyrinthine corridors that twisted like the veins of some ancient, wounded beast. The air down here, in the castle's underbelly, carried the musty scent of forgotten stone mingled with the sharp tang of torch resin, a sensory assault that clawed at their senses. Velvet drapes, heavy and dust-laden, brushed against their shoulders as they fled, their footsteps muffled on the threadbare rugs that lined the flagstone floors. Above, the clash of steel and snarls echoed like a symphony of doom. Victor's roars cutting through the din, a primal thunder that spoke of centuries of unchained fury. They burst into a hidden chamber, a relic from the manor's medieval origins, its walls paneled in dark oak, scarred by time and hidden claw marks from long-ago skirmishes. A single lantern hung from a rusted chain, its flame sputtering in the draught, casting erratic shadows that danced across the room like specters unwilling to rest. Elias barricaded the heavy door with a massive oak chest, his muscles straining under the black velvet of his tunic, now torn at the seams from the earlier fray. Clara leaned against the wall, her breath coming in shallow, labored gasps, the old illness clawing at her lungs like an insistent shadow. Her auburn hair, loosened from its pins, framed her face in wild tendrils, and her gray eyes, wide with a mix of terror and resolve, locked onto his. The mirror, salvaged in their haste and propped on a stone pedestal near the center of the room, reflected their disheveled forms. His sharp, angular features etched with the strain of restraint, her pallor ghostly under the lantern's amber glow. In this cocoon of Gothic intimacy, Elias's solitude, his self-imposed ethic of isolation, began to fracture like the thin ice on the North Sea beyond the cliffs. He had always viewed himself as a guardian of shadows, marked indelibly by the guilt of Ilara's final moments. His mother, the Dhampir queen, bound to Victor in a romance that blurred the lines between salvation and damnation, had chosen eternity's bite over the merciful void of death. She had been 25 in human years when the assassins came, her body already weakened by the slow poison of her hybrid transformation. Her eyes, once vibrant with human fire, dimming as she whispered her last plea to him, "Live, my shadow." Elias, just 21 then, had frozen in silence, his young voice stolen by the horror, the immortal blood in his veins, ensuring he would endure while she faded. That guilt had woven itself into his very essence, a trauma that rationalized all human connections as fleeting illusions destined to shatter against the unyielding wall of his eternity. Yet here, with Clara, resistance faltered. Her presence was the insistent light piercing his darkness, her human fragility a mirror to his own buried desires, for redemption, for a voice that could reclaim what was lost. Clara, too, carried her biography like a chain she had learned to wear with quiet defiance. Orphaned at 12 in the fog-choked alleys of Victorian London, she had watched her parents succumb to the cholera's relentless grip, their bodies racked by fever, while she, spared by some cruel twist of fate, emerged scarred and alone. The illness that followed, a persistent weakness in her lungs, flaring with every chill or exertion, had become her constant companion, a reminder of mortality's fragility. Abandoned by a fiancé who could not bear the burden of her delicacy, she had poured her disillusionment into teaching, seeking to forge meaning from suffering by awakening the silenced souls of others. Her desires ran deep, not just survival, but transformation, to witness and partake in a love that transcended the body's betrayals, even as she rationalized such hopes as folly in the face of her inevitable end. The chamber's confines forced introspection amid the mounting tension, their bodies close in the dim light, the air heavy with the scent of damp wool from her shawl and the faint, metallic undercurrent of his restrained vampiric hunger. "Why me, Elias?" Clara asked, her voice husky from the cold and fear, barely above the distant clamor of battle. She reached out, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, the texture of his skin cool and smooth like polished marble veined with subtle warmth. He did not pull away. Instead, he captured her hand, guiding it to the mirror's surface. With a piece of charcoal scavenged from the hearth, he wrote slowly, deliberately, "Because you see the shadow and stay. You mirror what I lost, light in the endless night." The words hung there, stark against the glass, a confession that wove philosophy into their shared breath. Hegel's dialectic came unbidden to Clara's mind, the thesis of his isolation clashing with the antithesis of her persistent warmth, birthing the possibility of synthesis, a union born not of impulse, but of inevitable choice. Outside, the storm's symphony raged on, the relentless lash of rain against the stone like accusatory fingers, the ragged breaths of combatants filtering through cracks in the walls, the thunderous heartbeats of wolves in the throes of battle. Victor, the Alpha King, fought with the ferocity of one who had outlived empires, his hybrid form a blur of fangs and claws, tearing through Silverfang ranks with the precision of a reaper. Elias sensed it all through the blood bond that tied him to his father, the tide of the skirmish turning, but at a cost. A low growl escaped his throat, unvoiced but resonant, as he paced the chamber's confines, his broad frame casting elongated shadows that seemed to reach for Clara like possessive tendrils. In this suspended moment, a ritual beckoned, ancient and symbolic, drawing from the pack's forgotten lore. Elias retrieved a dagger from a concealed niche in the wall, an heirloom blade, its hilt wrapped in worn leather, etched with runes that glowed faintly in the lantern light, speaking of oaths sworn in blood under blood moons. He pressed the tip to his palm, not deeply enough to maim, but sufficient to draw a thin line of crimson, the blood welling like rubies against the snow-white canvas of his skin. The metallic scent bloomed, sharp and intimate, mingling with the chamber's mustiness. "A vow," he wrote beside the first message, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that bordered on desperation. Clara hesitated, her chest tightening, not just from illness, but from the weight of the choice. Mortal blood, mingling with immortal, a bridge across the chasm. With trembling resolve, she pricked her own finger on the blade's edge, a bead of her warmer, pulsing life joining his on the mirror's frame. Their essences touched, symbolic and transformative, love manifesting as both curse and salvation. A bond that promised eternity's isolation shared, or the redemptive fire of mutual light. The sensory immersion deepened in that touch, the velvet softness of the mirrors backing against their wrists, the stinging bite of the cut fading into a warm throb, the lantern's glow illuminating droplets that caught the light like scattered stars. Death prowled the halls beyond, its invisible presence claiming lesser guards in guttural cries that pierced the storm, a taunt to their fragile sanctuary. It whispered of Alara's end, of Clara's fragility, urging surrender. Yet in this ritual, philosophy intertwined with the physical, the beauty of suffering as the forge of the soul, memory as the chain that bound them, faith in love's power to defy despair. As the assault peaked, Elias led Clara to a narrow vantage slit in the wall, peering out at the carnage unfolding in the courtyard below. Snow churned to crimson mud under paw and boot. Bodies twisting in the blizzard's embrace, victors form a dark silhouette, felling foes with regal savagery. A Silverfang Alpha, massive and scarred, lunged at the king, jaws snapping. Elias's beast surged within him, a feral urge to join the fray, to protect the legacy that had cost so much. He moved toward the door, muscles coiling, but paused, his lips parting in the first stirrings of sound after years of lock. The word hovered, unspoken, a threshold not yet crossed. The chamber door splintered under a fresh assault, wood cracking like brittle bone. Clara gasped as fangs gleamed in the widening breach, the intruder's eyes burning with predatory hunger. Elias whirled, positioning himself as shield, the dagger still in hand. Bloodied and ready. The unspoken word became a weapon yet to be forged, hanging in the balance as shadows encroached. The splintered door gave way with a resonant crack, admitting the Silverfang intruder's hulking form into the chamber's dim confines, a massive werewolf, its pelt matted with snow and blood, eyes glowing with the feral gleam of unchecked rage. The air shifted instantly, thickening with the musky stench of wet fur and the acrid bite of adrenaline, the lantern's flame flaring wildly as if recoiling from the intrusion. Elias shoved Clara behind him with a protective urgency, his body a barrier of taut muscle and shadowed resolve, the torn edges of his velvet tunic fluttering like raven wings in the sudden draft. The mirror, still propped on its pedestal, captured the scene in fractured glimpses. The beast's snarling maw distorted, Clara's wide-eyed fear superimposed over Elias's poised stance, a symbolic witness to the precipice they teetered upon. The clash erupted in a blur of motion and savagery, Elias's hybrid nature fully awakening as he met the intruder head-on. His eyes ignited to amber fire, veins pulsing with the vampiric essence that quickened his reflexes, while the wolfish strength in his limbs propelled him forward. Claws extended from his fingertips, raking across the werewolf's flank in a spray of dark blood that arced through the air, warm and viscous, splattering the oak panels and the mirror's surface in crimson streaks. The beast retaliated with a swipe that caught Elias's shoulder, tearing fabric and flesh in a searing line, the pain blooming like liquid fire down his arm. They grappled, bodies slamming against the stone walls with bone-jarring force, the chamber echoing with guttural snarls, the thud of flesh on unyielding rock, and the metallic ring of claws scraping iron fittings. Dust sifted from the ceiling like ash from a funeral pyre, and the lantern swung pendulously, casting erratic shadows that twisted their forms into monstrous silhouettes, light and shadow warring in cinematic frenzy. Clara pressed into the alcove, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, the old illness constricting her breath into shallow wheezes that she stifled with a hand over her mouth. The scent of blood, coppery and overwhelming, filled the space, mingling with the earthy musk of the fray, a texture that clung to her skin like an unwanted caress. She clutched the mirror's edge for stability, its smeared surface now a chaotic canvas, reflecting the violence in smeared abstracts, the symbolic fractures mirroring the chasms within her. The rational fear of this immortal world clashing with the inevitable pull toward Elias, her disillusioned heart yearning for the redemption he offered. Elias's ethic, forged in the fires of guilt and solitude, held firm even in the heat of battle. As he pinned the intruder against the floor, fangs bared at the exposed throat, a pulse of mercy stayed his lethal strike. This was no mindless kill. The werewolf's eyes held a flicker of desperation, a reflection of the pack's own shadowed existence. With a final, restrained shove, he hurled the beast back through the breached door, its form tumbling into the corridor with a yelp, fleeing into the storm-swept halls. The chamber fell into a ragged hush, broken only by their heaving breaths and the distant clamor of the ongoing siege above, Victor's triumphant roars signaling the tide's slow turn. Clara emerged from the shadows, her steps tentative on the blood-slicked floor, and approached Elias where he slumped against the wall, clutching his wounded shoulder. The metallic tang of his blood, slower to flow, tinged with an otherworldly sheen, wafted toward her, but it was her touch that grounded him. Gentle fingers probing the gash, the texture of her calloused palms, marked from years of turning book pages and mending lives, contrasting the raw wound. "You fought for us," she murmured, her voice a thread of compassion woven through the Gothic gloom, eyes shining with unshed tears that caught the lantern's dying light like diamonds on frost. She tore a strip from her shawl, binding the injury with practiced care, each wrap an intimate act that blurred the lines between healer and beloved. Elias watched her, his silence no longer a fortress, but a vessel brimming with unspoken turmoil. Guilt over Ilara's sacrificial love, the loneliness of his immortal blood, now pierced by this human light that demanded his voice. In the aftermath's fragile peace, introspection bloomed like a nocturnal flower amid the chamber's decay, overturned furnishings scattered like fallen soldiers, the air heavy with settling dust and the faint, lingering ozone of exertion. They sank onto a velvet settee, its fabric worn to a soft sheen, the mirror repositioned between them like a confessor awaiting absolution. Elias's desires crystallized in the quiet, to shatter his silence not for the pack's throne, but for her, to choose love's redemptive curse over eternity's isolating shadow. Clara, her body aching from the cold's insidious grip, rationalized the bond as a beautiful madness, mortal frailty entwined with undying strength, light daring to dwell in shadow. Her own scars surfaced in whispered confession. The abandonment by her fiancé, who had fled her bedside during a fever's peak, leaving her to forge resilience alone, a echo of Elias's voiceless vigil over Ilara's deathbed. Philosophy deepened the moment's ritual, their words, hers spoken, his inscribed on scraps of parchment scavenged from the floor, exploring Schopenhauer's will to life, the blind, insatiable drive toward union that persisted despite suffering's exquisite beauty. "We are all driven by this force," Clara said, her voice soft as the velvet beneath them. Choosing connection even when it dooms us to pain. Elias nodded, his charcoal strokes deliberate. Alara chose it for Victor, eternity's chain for love's fire. I see it in you now. The mirror captured their faces in tandem, the blood smears fading into abstract patterns that symbolize their merging paths. Memory as the bridge between despair and faith, the human soul's light illuminating the immortal's abyss. Victor entered then, bloodied but unbowed, his presence filling the chamber like a gathering storm, dark hair matted, eyes like forged steel gleaming with weary triumph. The Alpha King's hybrid form receded, leaving the regal lines of a man who had witnessed empires crumble. The walls hold, but the Silverfangs press harder, he rumbled, his gaze settling on his son with a mix of pride and impatience. Your voice could end this. Elias, rally the pack, seal our rule. The words hung heavy, a moral precipice, duty to legacy versus the personal redemption blooming in this hidden sanctum. Elias inclined his head, the weight of the choice settling like snow on his shoulders. Sensory layers enveloped them in the interlude. The velvet hush of dust motes drifting in the lantern's glow. The distant crash of waves against the cliffs like the sea's eternal heartbeat. The intimate warmth of Clara's breath on his skin as she adjusted the bandage. Death's shadow retreated with the intruder's flight, but its presence lingered in the wounds. Hers, a subtle cough echoing her fragility. His, a slow-healing gash that throbbed with each pulse, a reminder of vulnerability, even in immortality. As dawn's first pale light filtered through a high, narrow window, tinting the chamber in hues of rose and gold, the moral dilemma reached its zenith. Elias rose, facing the mirror alone for a moment, its surface now a palimpsest of their shared blood and confessions. In its depths, he saw not just his reflection, but Ilara's faint smile overlaying Clara's, a spectral blessing, urging transcendence. He turned to Clara, who watched him with bated breath, the air between them charged like the moments before a storm breaks. His lips parted, the silence of 7 years fracturing at last. The word escaped, a whisper raw with emotion, carrying the weight of lifetimes. Stay. Shock rippled through her like a shiver, her eyes widening as the sound bridged the chasm, human and immortal, light and shadow united in that single, uttered plea. But the respite shattered as Victor's howl pierced from above, a warning laced with urgency. The surviving Silverfangs regrouped in the courtyard, their numbers bolstered by a traitor within the manor's own ranks, a servant whose loyalty had crumbled under promises of power. Clara's hand tightened in Elias's, her pulse racing against his palm. The choice evolved in that instant, eternity together as allies in the fray, or perish apart in the encroaching dawn. The traitor's blade caught the first rays of dawn slicing through the manor's arrow slits, its edge glinting like a promise of betrayal as it plunged toward Victor's unguarded flank in the grand hall above. Chaos reignited in an instant, a maelstrom of howls, clashes, and the metallic screech of steel on steel reverberating through the velvet-hung corridors, like the death throes of the castle itself. The air thickened with the acrid scent of silver-laced wolfsbane, the Silverfang's favored poison, mingling with the coppery flood of blood and the salty tang of sweat-soaked exertion. Elias, the newly uttered word, stay, still vibrating in his throat like a sacred echo, surged from the chamber with Clara in tow, his voice, freed at last, emerging in sharp, commanding bursts that cut through the din. To me, hold the line. The sound was raw, unpolished, a thunderclap after years of brooding silence, carrying the authority of his hybrid blood and the desperation of newfound purpose. They ascended the spiral stairs, the stone steps worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, now slick with spilled blood that squelched under their boots. Tapestries depicting ancient pack triumphs, hunters under blood moons, lovers entwined in eternal vows, flapped in the drafts like tattered ghosts, their threads fraying further in the melee. The mirror, cradled carefully in Clara's arms despite the peril, captured fleeting images of the turmoil, red rivulets tracing marble veins, golden torchlight flickering on snarling faces, the chaotic ballet of life and death played out in distorted reflections. Elias's beast form partially manifested, eyes glowing amber, claws extended, as he barreled into the fray, intercepting a Silverfang warrior mid-lunge. His strikes were precise, a blend of vampiric speed and lupine power, driving foes back with roars that blended seamlessly with the storm's lingering fury outside. Clara, undaunted by her frailty, wielded a fallen candelabro as an improvised weapon, its branching arms swinging in wide arcs, flames whipping like defiant spirits that singed fur and ignited howls of pain. Her breaths came in ragged bursts, the illness clawing at her chest, but her gray eyes burned with resolve, each swing a testament to the transformation she had ignited in him. Victor's form dominated the hall's center, a whirlwind of immortal fury as he disarmed the traitor, a wiry servant whose eyes widened in shock at the king's unyielding grip. The Alpha King, centuries etched into the lines of his face yet unbowed by time, twisted the blade from the man's hand and hurled him aside, the body crumpling against a pillar with a dull thud. Blood from a dozen minor wounds seeped through his dark attire, staining velvet to a deeper crimson, but his gaze, steel-hard and paternal, found Elias across the chaos. The echo of Alara's death hung between father and son, her Dhampir choice for Victor's love, a redemptive act that had bound their hybrid dynasty, now mirrored in this son's vocal rebirth. Guilt, long Elias's silent companion, transmuted in the heat of battle into a fierce protectiveness, not just for the pack, but for the fragile human who had whispered life back into him. The conflict spilled outward, packs converging on the cliff's edge where the manor perched like a sentinel over the roiling North Sea. Snow swirled in eddies, blanketing the ground in a deceptive purity now marred by churned mud and fallen forms. Elias faced the Silverfang Alpha at the precipice, a colossal figure, scarred from countless wars, its breath steaming in the chill air like accusations. Words flowed from Elias now, unbidden and profound, infusing the confrontation with philosophy's weight. This ends not in death's blind grasp, but in choice, the redemption of shadows through light we dare to claim. The Alpha hesitated, its growl faltering at the air's voice, a sound prophesied to unify or destroy. Clara stood at Elias's side, the mirror set on a rocky outcrop, its surface frosting over yet reflecting their united front, her hand in his, the texture of wind-tossed hair mingling with the chill spray from waves crashing hundreds of feet below. Sensory immersion crested in the climax. The velvet crash of bodies tumbling into snowdrifts, the metallic ring of claws scraping against rune-etched blades, the intimate warmth of Clara's body pressed close against the gale's bite. Distant thunder rumbled like the earth's own heartbeat, punctuated by the ragged symphony of breaths. Human frailty, immortal endurance, the pack's collective pulse. Death circled relentlessly, claiming foes in sprays of blood that steamed on the cold stone, its invisible hand brushing shoulders and whispering temptations of surrender. Yet it spared the protagonists, Victor's ethic of mercy, tempered by Alara's sacrificial love, mirroring Elias's own as he felled the Alpha not with a killing blow, but a disarming strike, forcing submission under the weight of eloquent command. Transformation unfolded in the battle's waning light. Elias's voice sealed a tenuous peace, the rival pack bowing to the hybrid heir's authority, their howls shifting from defiance to reluctant allegiance. Victor nodded from afar, his wounds knitting slowly under immortal grace, Alara's memory a silent blessing woven into the dawn. Clara, her illness a persistent shadow that flared with each exertion, faced the ultimate choice tentatively. A Dhampir's path, eternity's offer through Elias's bite, resisted no longer in the face of their bond's inevitability. He knelt before her on the cliff, the mirror nearby capturing the moment in pristine clarity. Her nod, the prick of fangs at her throat, the warm rush of shared blood that promised life anew, love as both curse, eternal witnessing of loss, and salvation, turning suffering's beauty into transcendent union. Yet the curse's undercurrent lingered, immortality's loneliness now shared but undiminished, love's redemptive pain, a double-edged blade that cut deep. As fresh snow fell softly, blanketing the scars of battle, Elias held Clara close, the word eternal unspoken, but etched in their gazes, a vow against the void. Victor approached, clasping his son's shoulder, the pack gathering in hushed reverence under the moon's waning glow. The sea whispered below, its waves a eternal echo of choices made and unmade. In the quiet aftermath, atop the cliffs where light pierced shadow at last, they stood at the threshold, redeemed souls transformed by the forge of suffering, the beauty of human fragility illuminating the immortal's path. But faint whispers from the fog-shrouded horizon hinted at new shadows stirring, choices eternal in their unending cycle, love's light forever tested by night's embrace. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned.